because I prefer the Jesus jukes, right? What I saw actually a lot in Elphaba were these little pieces of Christ parallels all over the place. I mean, you see Elphaba, she learns of a false king, a false gospel, a false power in her world.
Yep.
Meanwhile, all along, she is anointed, and she's the awaited power that people are actually looking for. And she ends up being a suffering servant of Oz. All of these things picture her as a Christ figure. I mean, so the Wizard of Oz. One thing I like about this movie is, even though it's twisting Wizard of Oz, the villain is still the prince and power of this air who's blinded the minds of people, like 2 Corinthians says of people. It's the Wizard of Oz, his lies. And so she sees this false Christ, and the whole movie hinges on the idea of the truth of this propaganda, that if you find an enemy, people will be united against that and they can be controlled. And how does the wizard do this? He says there's this story of the Grimmery? I call it the Grammarly until I looked it up. Like, he's the one who could decipher the Grimmery, but who can really do it? It's Elphaba. And he's actually searching for the real power to exploit it. But he's holding them captive with a lie. And she is even strong enough to reject the temptations of this wizard. Mm-hmm. Cough, cough, like Jesus, right? Who's not? Glinda. She can't overcome the temptation for popularity, for the Emerald City. But Elphaba can, like Christ. Yeah. She also sees through the lies of this false god, like Jesus, who sees through the lies and brings truth. Yeah. Jesus, who, as Hebrews 4:15 says, was tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin. She's the only one who breaks free and defies gravity, defies the gravity of this world, the rules of this world. And then ultimately, Elphaba, she is a rejected, unattracted savior who's marked for spiritual greatness all the way from birth, right? She ends up substituting herself for Glinda at the end, saying, she did nothing wrong. I'm the one you want. Yeah. And to have the huge Jesus tie-in, the strongest Old Testament prophecy about Christ, Isaiah 53. So you can have Jesus in your mind, and if you can hold Elphaba in your mind at the same time, listen to these words. For he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. But it shifts. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. So that's a prophecy of Jesus' rejection and substitutionary death on the cross. He calls himself the servant who didn't come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And so we see the end of this movie is Elphaba stepping into a role that looks very similar. It's not identical, but very, very similar. She's going to be a symbol of wickedness in order
melted for Oz's iniquities.
Melted for Oz's iniquities, right? Probably to oppose the wizard, save the animals, while being this figure of scorn and rejection. And you go, even though this movie is like people, it's so postmodern and alternative and a new story. Be like, it's preaching a theme of the Messiah, maybe not obvious to most people, but she's a anointed, suffering servant who discovers her calling and embraces it, and then it's the midpoint of the movie. That's where she ends.
We hope you enjoyed this snack-sized taste of popcorn theology. Check out the full episode using the link in the description. Subscribe on YouTube for more content. Follow and interact on social media to share with others. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.